Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. We're diving into a topic that might seem a little intimidating, maybe even a little taboo to some. We're going to be talking about fisting.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we're here to break it down for you, make it approachable, make it fun. And who better to guide us than Sarah Sloane?
Right.
Her chapter on fisting in Tristan Taormino's book, it's like the ultimate guide. So we're going to unpack all of that for you today.
Yeah, Sloane really gets into like the mechanics and the physiology, which I think is like a really important place to start when you're trying to understand fisting.
For sure. So let's start with anatomy. What does Sarah Sloane really highlight as important for us to understand?
Well, she starts by emphasizing, the incredible elasticity of the vagina.
Okay.
And she actually includes some really great illustrations in the chapter, which I found really helpful. And it's not about a fixed space. It's like this dynamic interplay of muscles and tissues.
Right. So it's not one size fits all down there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Sloane really, wants to debunk that myth. And she points out that a person's capacity for fisting is influenced by a bunch of factors that vary from person to person.
Okay. So like what? Like, give us the deets.
So like hormones play a huge role, especially estrogen.
Okay.
Because that affects like the thickness and the resilience of the vaginal walls, which can impact how much they can stretch.
So somebody's experience might be different depending on where they are in their cycle or even in life, like in menopause.
Totally. Absolutely, yeah. Sloane really wants to emphasize how individual this is. And then it's not just about hormones either. Previous surgeries can also have an impact.
Okay.
So, scar tissue won't have the same elasticity as normal skin.
Right. Scar tissue is a lot less flexible.
Exactly. And then finally, she also points out that like bone structure and build can play a role.
Right.
So some people just naturally have like a smaller vaginal opening or less space in their pelvic region, and that can affect things too.
Wow, so many different factors to consider. That's pretty amazing how our bodies work, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like Sloane is really big on making sure that people understand that like everybody's different.
Absolutely. And that's like so key for approaching fisting or frankly any intimate activity.
Yeah.
With a sense of curiosity and respect for individual experiences.
So true. Okay, so now we've kind of gotten like a crash course in anatomy.
Yeah.
So we talked about how important it is to understand our own bodies and respect those individual differences. But what about the actual preparation? Like, where do we even begin?
Well, this is where I think Sarah Sloane's guidance is so valuable because she goes beyond just like the physical mechanics and she really emphasizes like a holistic approach to preparation.
Okay, I like that. So holistic. So we're talking about more than just like grabbing the lube and dimming the lights.
Way more. Yeah, she really stresses that open communication is absolutely paramount.
Well, yeah, consent is key, right?
Absolutely. And not just like the initial yes, but like ongoing enthusiastic consent throughout the experience. And so Sloane really encourages partners to have like a detailed conversation beforehand, like discussing boundaries, desires, any fears or anxieties.
So really laying it all out on the table.
Precisely, yeah. It's about creating this space of mutual trust and understanding where both partners can feel safe expressing their needs and limits.
Yeah, because feeling safe and understood would like definitely enhance the physical experience, I would imagine.
Totally. And that actually ties into her next point, which is setting the mood. She reminds us that environment can play a huge role in relaxation and enjoyment.
Okay, so we're thinking candles, music, maybe a little massage oil to set the scene.
Yeah. If that's what works for you, absolutely. The key is to create an atmosphere where you both feel comfortable and can like fully surrender to the experience. Sloane talks about like adjusting the temperature, the lighting, even scent. It's really about tailoring the environment to create a sense of safety and sensuality.
So it's about like crafting an experience, not just like rushing into something.
Exactly. And of course, part of that is having all the right supplies on hand.
So let's talk lube. Because Sloane, she has some specific recommendations there, right?
She does, yeah. She's a big advocate for high-quality body-safe lubes, especially for fisting. She specifically recommends avoiding things like glycerin and parabens, as those can be irritating to sensitive tissues.
Good to know. What about gloves? Because I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So Sloane actually recommends gloves even for fluid-bonded partners.
Fluid-bonded meaning, just to clarify for our listeners.
Of course, yeah. Fluid-bonded refers to couples who are having unprotected sex and exchanging fluids.
Okay.
But even then, Sloane recommends gloves for fisting because they create a smoother surface and protect the vaginal tissues from any like microabrasions.
So even if you think your hands are perfectly smooth, there's still that like added layer of protection.
Exactly, yeah. It's about minimizing friction as much as possible. And here's a really practical tip from Sloane. Have an absorbent pad or towel ready nearby.
Makes sense. Things could get a little messy.
Exactly. It's just about being prepared and not letting little mishaps interrupt the flow. But here's where Sloane takes things to a whole other level, and that is the importance of mental preparation.
Okay. See, this is fascinating to me. Tell me more about what she says.
Well, she's a huge proponent of relaxation techniques, particularly deep breathing
Yeah, it's
exercises.
just calming those nerves, getting centered.
Exactly, because, when we're anxious or nervous, our bodies tense up, and that can make things more difficult. And so deep breathing can really help to calm the nervous system, relax those muscles.
Are there any other mental preparation techniques that Sloane recommends?
She also talks about the power of visualization, and not just visualizing a pleasurable experience, but specifically visualizing the vagina opening up, becoming more receptive.
So using the power of the mind to influence like the physical sensations.
Exactly. It's about getting yourself in the right headspace and working with your body, not against it. And part of that, Sloane stresses, is being honest about any anxieties or fears you might have.
Right, because communication doesn't stop once things get heated.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. If there are any hang-ups from past experiences or concerns about how things will go, talking about them beforehand can make a world of difference.
It's about building that like foundation of trust and intimacy so that both partners feel safe and supported throughout the experience. It sounds like Sarah Sloane really emphasizes the importance of taking a mindful and collaborative approach to fisting.
That's exactly right.
This is all such great information. Now, I'm really curious about the actual techniques involved. What does Sarah Sloane have to say about that?
Okay. Well, before we dive into techniques, there's one more really essential aspect of preparation that Sloane emphasizes, and that's getting in touch with your pelvic floor muscles.
You mean those muscles that we use to, well, stop the flow of urine?
Exactly. Those are your pelvic floor muscles, and they play a crucial role in fisting. Sloane actually recommends practicing Kegel exercises to strengthen and gain better control over those muscles.
That makes sense. Stronger muscles, more control, better experience overall. How does one go about doing these Kegel exercises?
It's actually pretty simple. Imagine you're trying to stop the flow of urine midstream.
Okay.
Those are your pelvic floor muscles contracting. So you just hold that contraction for a few seconds and then release. Sloane suggests doing several repetitions throughout the day.
Sounds like a good exercise to incorporate into your daily routine, even outside the bedroom.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's super beneficial for overall pelvic health and sexual pleasure.
Nice.
Now, once you've kind of got a good handle on your Kegels, Sloane suggests kind of exploring the territory, so to speak.
By that you mean?
She recommends starting with one finger gently inserted into the vagina and kind of getting acquainted with the sensations. Experiment with different movements, contracting and relaxing those pelvic floor muscles.
So it's about really getting to know your own body, how it responds, what feels good.
Precisely, yeah. Sloane emphasizes that it's not about rushing toward full fist penetration, but rather a gradual exploration. And once you're comfortable with one finger, you can gradually add more, maybe two, then three.
Always paying attention to your body's signals along the way.
Exactly. Communication is key throughout this whole process. If something feels uncomfortable, even slightly, stop and readjust.
This is all about listening to your body and respecting its limits.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the techniques themselves.
Okay.
So Sloane emphasizes that there's no one right way to fist.
Right.
It's about finding what feels good for both partners, and that often involves experimentation and open communication.
So it's less about following a strict set of instructions and more about just exploring and finding what works.
Precisely. She suggests experimenting with different hand positions, angles, rhythms, always checking in with your partner to gauge their comfort and pleasure.
What are some of the specific techniques that Sloane recommends?
So one technique she describes is the come hither motion, where the hand gently curls inward, almost like beckoning the receiver deeper.
Interesting. Are there any others?
Another technique involves using the flat of the hand to gently stretch the vaginal walls, focusing on a slow rhythmic movement.
It sounds like it's all about finding a rhythm and flow that works for both partners.
Exactly. And communication is Again, crucial throughout this entire experience. Using verbal cues, hand signals, or even like prearranged safe words can help maintain a safe and pleasurable experience.
So even when things get intense,
Mm.
it's important to keep those lines of communication open.
Absolutely. And if at any point there's discomfort or pain, that's a clear sign to stop and reassess.
Safety first, always. It sounds like Sarah Sloane has a lot of valuable advice to offer. This is all incredibly insightful. But I think we need to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more from our deep dive into fisting guided by the wisdom of Sarah Sloane. And we're back with our deep dive into fisting guided by Sarah Sloane's awesome chapter. We've covered so much already.
Yeah.
From anatomy to preparation to even some techniques.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's still more to unpack, right?
Totally. Sarah Sloane doesn't just focus on the physical techniques. She also really dives into the mental and emotional aspects of fisting.
Right, because it's not just about the physical sensations, it's also about like what's going on in our heads, right?
Exactly. Yeah, she talks about how negative thoughts and performance anxiety can actually really get in the way of a positive experience. If the receiver is tense or anxious, their muscles will naturally contract, which can make things more difficult and less pleasurable for everyone.
Right. It's like our bodies are reflecting our mental state.
Precisely. So Sloan emphasizes the importance of addressing any of those like mental or emotional barriers beforehand.
Okay, so how do we do that? Like, what are some ways to kind of overcome those negative thoughts?
Well, for starters, Sloan recommends being honest with yourself and your partner about any fears or anxieties that you might have. Like even just voicing those concerns can sometimes help to lessen their power.
Yeah, it's about open communication and creating that safe space for vulnerability, I guess.
Exactly. And beyond that, she talks about the power of positive affirmations and reframing negative thoughts.
Give me some examples, like what kind of affirmations we're talking about here.
Sure. So, like, instead of focusing on thoughts like, what if I'm not open enough? Sloan suggests reframing it to something like, my body is capable of amazing things, and I'm open to exploring those sensations.
Oh, I see. It's about shifting that internal dialogue to be more like empowering and positive.
Exactly. And she also talks about using visualization techniques, not just to imagine like a pleasurable experience, but to specifically visualize the vagina relaxing, opening up, becoming more receptive.
Oh, so kind of like we talked about before, like using the power of the mind to influence the physical sensations.
Precisely. And she reminds us that this takes practice. Just like any skill, the more you kind of work on relaxing those muscles and cultivating a positive mindset, the easier it becomes.
This is all so insightful. It's like, I feel like we often focus so much on like the physical aspects of intimacy that we kind of forget about the power of our minds as well.
Absolutely. And I think Sarah Sloane really brings that to lay in this chapter. She emphasizes that fisting, maybe even more so than other sexual acts, requires like a deep level of trust and surrender, both physically and mentally.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's about letting go, both physically and mentally,
Yeah.
to fully kind of experience those sensations.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really important aspect that Sloane covers, and that is aftercare.
Okay, let's talk aftercare. So what does Sloane recommend for after a fisting session?
Well, she starts with the practical stuff, so she suggests using witch hazel wipes, which are soothing and can help to reduce any swelling. And she also reminds us that, like, urinating after fisting is important to help flush out any bacteria.
Right. Good hygiene is always a good idea, no matter what kind of intimate activity you're engaging in.
Absolutely. But again, Sloane goes beyond just the physical aftercare. She emphasizes the importance of emotional and spiritual connection after such an intense experience.
So like taking the time to cuddle, connect, maybe even just talk about the experience.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about honoring the intimacy that's been shared and taking the time to really like reconnect on an emotional level, maybe even a spiritual level.
I love that. Well, this has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much from Sarah Sloane's chapter, even beyond like the specifics of fisting. It's really about approaching intimacy with a sense of curiosity and respect and a willingness to explore like both the physical and the mental aspects.
Totally.
It's really cool.
I agree. I think she gives such a comprehensive and insightful guide to fisting and really emphasizes communication and consent and self-awareness throughout, which is so important.
She really emphasizes that it's a journey, not a destination, and that taking the time to understand your own body, communicate with your partner, and cultivate a positive mindset can make all the difference.
Absolutely. And that's a message that really applies to like all forms of intimacy, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of fisting, guided by the amazing Sarah Sloane. We hope you found this conversation informative and empowering, and hopefully a little fun, too. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we understand about our bodies and our desires, the more fulfilling our intimate experiences can be. Until next time, keep exploring.